Well, welcome everybody to East End Books Ptown on a beautiful summer night right before the 4th of July. For people watching at some point during the live stream or the big audience that watches the recording afterwards, you can see our beautiful Cannery Wharf Park, which is now open this summer. They did a great job out there. This is going to be a great spot for people in town to watch the fireworks tomorrow night. It's a great view out here. And it does have one of the few public bathrooms on the East End. It's that fancy kind of European style bathroom over there. So we're really excited to have you out here, and we're glad that we're able to be outside again. We were all across town last summer because the park was being constructed, so it's awesome to be here. And I'll have a couple announcements, but I did want to say, and I'll do a quick introduction, but it's very exciting to have Phil here tonight. And of course, Greg, who I've known a long time, but Phil and I have a mutual friend, Michael Knott, and they teach together in London. And Michael was trying to arrange for us to meet while I was in London, and it just didn't work out. And so I'm just thrilled that we're now able to meet and have this event here. And Michael Knott, some people will remember we had a big event with him 2 years ago at our store in Boston with him and Robert Pinsky. Michael wrote the phenomenal book, Tom Gunn, A Cool Career Life, which has won the Hatcher's Prize in England for top biography. And I think it's a big achievement. If you haven't read that book, get it. And if you don't know about Tom Gunn, he was an amazing writer, author, very much out queer when it was not safe to be so. And Robert Pinsky and Tom Gunn, for a period of time, taught together at Berkeley. That's how they know each other. So anyway, it's great to have Phil here. So just a couple things. I'll try to balance here. So one is the annual collectible that sells out every year. Provincetown Art Magazine is out, and the awesome, incredible Major Jackson is on the cover. Major is just a brilliant poet. He is on the faculty of Fine Arts Work Center, and he's got a new volume of poetry out, and his wife Dee Dee Jackson has a new fantastic volume of poetry, and we've got both of them in the store. So this is for sale if you want to get it. And we do have a few copies left of a previous edition with John Waters on the cover and signed by John, so that's in there as well as his new screenplay series. There's 3 that are out so far, which is an update. There's new photographs, just a little additional stuff from him, and really great cover art that really pops. And I didn't know this until he told me a couple of weeks ago, but all the books over the years, all the cover art is fan art that gets selected. So it's not like the book designers choosing or him choosing. So I think that's pretty awesome. So any artists out there, maybe you might be featured on a future John Waters book. Okay, so what is coming up? The whole schedule's on the website. We have these handy dandy cards. And in this issue that just came out today of the Provincetown magazine, we have a full-page ad for the July schedule. All book events at 6 p.m. There's one that's not. On July 15th from 2 to 3 p.m. we have a book signing and meet and greet. Dr. Joe Court, who's got a new book out called Side Guys, and we've got cards inside about that. He's written a number of good books, and he's going to be he'll be there with merch and some other stuff. He's a really amazing person, got millions of followers on TikTok, and we hope to get him back for an event. Our schedule is just packed this summer, so we will get him back, but he'll be here signing books and talking to anybody that wants to chat. Okay, the next event this week, we take a break tomorrow. It's 4th of July, Saturday, and we have the wonderful Christina Clancy in with her new book, The Snowbirds, which is set in Palm Springs. Some of you may remember her book from several years ago, The Second Home, which is set in Wellfleet. That's being made into a movie, and I hope she'll have some details to share with us. It's the guy that, I can never say his name. He played Jaime Lannister on Game of Thrones. He owns the rights to the book. He put his own money into it. Nikolai, something. And so I hopefully they'll be shooting that soon. Okay, and then a whole bunch of events. Another kind of local area event is July 13th, Hush Little Fire. Really great new novel out from Pink and Random House. It's Judith Newcomb Stiles, who's a phenomenal artist in Wellfleet. And if you know Newcomb Hall, she's one of the famous the Newcombs there. It's a really sexy, hot book, and I'm going to ask her, she did say that she might be run out of town because it's fiction, but there are people that know some of those things. So that's really great. Just flashing through a lot of people know Nicole Tresca. She's going to be back with Wonderland, and Casey Sherman's back with Blood in the Water. A lot of interesting things happening. One event this month on July 10th at our store in the Seaport. We've got 3 amazing poets led by Bob Sikora with his new book, Utopians in Love. It's all there on our website. So, and we will have signed copies of Phil's book here, and also he'll be signing copies at our store in Boston. So the books are there as well. So hopefully, I don't know when you're doing that. Is that
Saturday?
Saturday, okay. So yeah, so the very next day, or maybe even that day, if you pop into our store in the Seaport, you can get books signed there. I will say we've sold a whole lot of copies of this fantastic book, so much to the point that I was having anxiety that I wouldn't have any books, for the actual event. And his publisher is amazing, and they got the latest shipment like that to me. So I'm really thankful for them. Okay, so Phil Melanson is a graduate of New York University and the University of Warwick. A former movie marketer for Universal Pictures and Sony Pictures, he now lectures in film and television for Boston University, and he lives in London. Greg Salvatori is a photographer and painter published in more than 30 countries. His visionary art is playful yet sophisticated, blending contemporary techniques and aesthetics with classical beauty, that's what I'm going to say. His paintings are joyful and deliberate, making full use of the vibrance of color and innovative media and tools like metallic prints and augmented reality. This novel is brash and breathtaking. It's a lush historical drama that unfolds in a city on the brink of a new age as it contends with the tensions between public and private lives, the entanglement of erotic and creative impulse, the sacrifices of the determinedly pious, and the risks of fantastic power. With his unforgettable characters and an ever-twisting plot, all told with style, skill, and wry black humor, Phil Melanson emerges as an enthralling new voice in contemporary fiction, and that's a word from Tim Leach. I think the finest praise you can give, among the finest praise for an author, is when booksellers from other stores where he's not doing an event call to get books signed. So I had people from Politics and Prose buy books for him to sign because they love the book and they want a signed copy. So I think that's pretty amazing. Congratulations. That's Politics and Prose. Maybe you will get out there at some point.
I would love to go down
to do an event. I'm sure I'm going to put you in contact with the person who's a big fan.
If they're following along, I'll come down to DC. I'll change my flight.
Great. Well, thank you. Without further ado, I give you to these 2 amazing people.
Thank you so much, John. So, this is potentially the last event of this phase of the book tour, so it feels really correct to be doing it here in Provincetown, surrounded by friends as well. Typically, how I think we've started these events is with a brief reading to just give you a taste of what the book might be like. I think all you need to know from the onset is that it does follow 3 different young men who are from Florence. One of them being Lorenzo de Medici, the heir to the Medici Bank. One of them being Francesco Salviati, who is a priest from Florence who then moves to Rome. And then the third, and really the heart of the novel, is a young gay painter whom we know today as Leonardo da Vinci. We're in Ptown, and it's basically still Pride Month, so I was going to do a different reading than I normally have. I'd love input from the group. So we've got like a romantic spicy scene, and we've got like a cruising scene. What do people want?
We only get one.
Which one? Cruising? Spicy? I'm hearing, okay, I'm getting 2 different.
Both. Cruising is sexy, right?
Okay, we're going cruising.
We're going cruising.
We are potentially going cruising. What I will say is, all you need to know, this comes about 50 pages into the novel. At this stage, Leonardo is still studying as an apprentice in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, who is a prominent painter and sculptor in Florence. At this point in the novel, Leonardo has worked up the courage to visit a brothel where he knows a model that he has become infatuated might be working. However, right before I begin, he has just, let's say, chickened out of walking into the brothel. And this is what he does afterwards. His feet dash away, following a different path, rushing toward its end, where the river cuts across the city. He climbs down from the street down to the banks of cracked, dry mud. The scent of fatty sausage greets him, ashy wood smoke in its wake. He walks along the Arno toward bonfires and makeshift camps. Here, lively under the moonlight, are the city's misfit figures. Fife players with bushy white beards, straight-haired women reading palms for a coin, gaunt children kicking pebbles. He wishes he could set down an easel and paint them in the light of day. Something would be absent, though. He continues westward, his feet slowing until he reaches another bridge. Ahead, the moon-blanched reeds sway gently in the warm breeze that refuses to submit to autumn's approach. No fires burn in this part of the riverbank. The rivers drift in darkness. Men, all of them standing underneath the bridge or crouching low by the river. They wait, they search, and sometimes they follow each other and disappear into the reeds. This dance, it is wordless and subtle, its movements are slow and careful, but there's feeling in all of it. It's what he wants to do with his own work, if he ever gets to paint something on his own. He has walked here many times, always upriver from the reeds, never passing beneath the bridge. He knows what happens behind the screen of those reeds, even if he has never seen it. Sometimes he hears it, a cry like the one he heard inside the tavern, the unexpected wet sound of skin slapping skin cutting above the rush of the white-capped river. Tonight, he steps underneath the bridge. He knew he was going to. His curiosity is an insatiable thing. The tract of shadow is narrow yet cave-like. Water drips from the vaulted stones. His feet slide over scummy rocks. Ahead, under the pale light of the narrow moon, the reeds tremble. He walks toward them, steps into the thicket, the stiff grass stroking his bare legs. He hears water lapping at the shore, hears his shaking breath, and then he hears another breath. He stops, hears a second, deeper, raspier. He should turn back now, but he wants to see the picture that makes these sounds. He parts the papery stalks with his hands. Amid the dull beige reeds, two men are huddled together. One of them, his long hair threaded with silver, is standing. His hose are crumpled by his feet. He's pressing forward into the backside of the other man, who kneels before him with his palms in the soil. Leonardo, silent, studies them, the muscles carving shadows, the cord-like sinews visible one moment, gone the next. The marshy earth beneath his boots feels as if it might suck him in. He closes his eyes, tries to steady himself, but in the darkness he feels every ugly reality of his body. How his tongue hangs in his mouth, how his cock presses stiffly against his tunic. The wind rises, crashing through the reeds, a cicada roar. He opens his eyes. He hasn't moved. The heaving men are still in front of him, closer even. The man standing upright turns his head. His eyes, the whites as bright as milk, look at Leonardo. The gaze is like a knife in his chest. He tramples through the reeds, away from the water's edge, away from the men. He runs back under the bridge, not daring to look into the dark. He retreats upriver, incessantly tugging down his tunic, trying to hide his shame. Ahead, the bonfires have been snuffed out, only faint embers remain. The vagabonds have crawled beneath their quilts. It's only Leonardo still awake here tonight, alone in this time suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. He shouldn't feel this surprise, he tells himself. He knew what happens in the tavern, knew what happens by the river. He knew he wanted to see it. There's no comfort in this, in knowing what his body craves to do, what he knows he cannot do. He is a painter. He cannot step into the tavern or back into those reeds. That would make him into something else. What he's seen tonight, it's something to tuck away. And we'll leave off there.
This is brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you wrote the you read this part because it's a very crucial moment.
It is.
For this kid that we all know. And I told you, I made a point to go read this book, and to go read the book at Boy Beach because I wanted to be surrounded by naked contemporary queers cruising to read something about other queer people 400 years ago, and it was a very good choice. And I remember reading this and really looking around and thinking like nothing has changed. It's a very interesting way that you launch yourself into describing this aspect of the character, and I wanted to expand on that because you know him.
Well, I think when I was, it was very intimidating to write about someone like Leonardo da Vinci. I, frankly, was very reluctant to do it. I knew I wanted to write a book that was set during the Italian Renaissance, that focused on this relationship between art and commerce, which, frankly, is an angle that I think a lot of literature about the time does not delve into, but I think it's a crucial part of the story. And I started with thinking about writing about Sandro Botticelli. It didn't quite intrigue me the same way that Leonardo did, mainly because there's so many unanswered questions about Leonardo. He is so famous, and that was very intimidating to me. But at the same time, his earlier career was quite troubled. He really, he falls behind a lot of his peers like Botticelli, and that prompted me to wonder why. And then I think the other aspect that really unlocked writing about him, and I think the read scene is a component of that, is his sexuality, which many scholars, many academics neglect to talk about, which is something we can get more into. It's a curious decision they make there. And for me, as a novelist who is imagining the gaps between the historical record, I think it was an opportunity to think about what would his queer life have looked like. A lot of these anecdotes about men having sex by the river are actual, there are historical anecdotes that survive from the 1450s that speak to that. This is not something I particularly made up. Florence was quite famous at the time for being a bit of a hotbed. The Arno, or like the space by the public baths being the boy beach of Renaissance Florence.
Yeah, and that's clear that you did a lot of research. Like I lived 10 years in Florence, as you know, and husband one was a Florentine man, and it was amazing to read and to feel like, obviously, like the fiction part and like you're imagining the gaps, the historical gaps, but the depth of the research and how comfortable you are in walking around this Florence and really bring us around. I want to know how long have you been researching on this?
Oh boy, I would say I started researching the project in earnest in 2018, 2019, and it was like 18 months of research before I even sat down and wrote a single word. And when I did finally do that first sentence, I was on a research trip to Florence, and I sat down in my little hotel room and I was like, okay, I think I'm finally ready to begin. Of course, the research, it's not a linear process. There are questions that reemerge. But I was very lucky, and I think sitting in London, especially lucky to just keep returning to, at one point as we were slowly emerging from the pandemic, I did get to spend an entire October in the city and just focus on answering every little question I had about like what would Leonardo's morning walk would have looked like, where were the markets, how does the light hit the water at a particular type of day. You can really fall down a rabbit hole thinking about these questions.
The beauty of that, Florence hasn't changed.
Yes, and
so that walk that you were having was exactly the walk that he was having.
Exactly, and I'm really lucky to have written about a city that has been remarkably preserved, and not just the buildings and the edifices, but the historical record as well. Some of my approach for this book was never to make anything up. There's one little liberty I give myself, which I will divulge at the end of the book. It's not a major one, I would argue. But my thinking was that, this is a rich time in history. I should be respectful to the hard work of historians that have come first. I very much respect novelists like Hilary Mantel, who approach historical fiction as a means of filling in gaps rather than rewriting history.
The other aspect that is really striking to me is your narrative, the way that you unlock the story, and you took the decision of having three main characters instead of just focusing on one, which is an interesting aspect. And reading the book, the thing that strikes me is every chapter you start with a scene that is very visual, but you have to build up to understand who's the actor in front of you, like which of the three is it going to be. So there's a little guessing game that you test us with, and I think it creates a good pace in the experience of reading, in the actual reading the story, and I really enjoyed it, and I would love to know how you come up with that idea.
Yes. Part of it might be influenced, I studied screenwriting and film and television for my undergrad, and I do think there is some sort of like script brain that is like, my brain has been rewired to some extent. I love books, but I also love films, I love television series. And so this idea of moving between these characters, I think that is an influence of that. But more than anything, it's like I felt like I couldn't tell the story of Leonardo without explaining the dynamics of power that are shaping the city that he is living in during this pivotal point in history. And you can't talk about those power brokers like the Medici without talking about how they are wrestling with the influence of the Catholic Church. And so, quite, I guess, methodically, I was like, okay, I'm going to have the banker, I'm going to have the priest, and I'm going to have the artist, because I think those are really the three pillars of what, we call today the Renaissance.
And they're really intertwined, and,
yes.
And it's interesting as they get closer and closer to each other. It's really there's a teasing aspect to your writing that is that's really appealing, and it creates a nice expectations every chapter. So I really enjoyed that. And how did you choose Salviati? Why him?
Salviati was fascinating to me. So he is certainly the least known of the three points of view that the novel are centered on. There's a lot of research about the Medici family, of course, and even more about Leonardo. Salviati's a bit of a question mark. I have to be careful about how I answer this, partially because of actions he makes that are very much a fabric of the story. Much of what we might have known about him has really been erased from the historical record. No official portraits survive of him. We know he came from a prominent Florence family, but he chooses to embark on a career in the church. And I was very fascinated with this person who is choosing to leave this city that really feels like it's on the precipice of really being the center of the world, the Western world at the time. And so what would prompt someone to leave that kind of environment? In the book, I describe him as a bastard. That's something he shares in common with Leonardo, who is also a bastard. And I was really interested in this idea of a character where, his faith is his most central tenet, but what happens when you push that faith to its limits? What happens when someone doesn't get delivered what they have been promised over and over again? And unfortunately, it pushes him to some dark decisions, but those bring him back to Florence in an interesting way. And that's where I will leave things without spoiling the rest of the book.
Yeah, it's really fascinating on that aspect. So you said you mentioned you spent some time in Florence, and you use that time, I'm assuming, to create this visual, because you're clearly very visual. The way you write, there's moments that you can see the image in your head, and it's a movie, and I guess somebody's going to option it, by the way.
I would love that. If anyone's on the live stream, please option it.
And it's interesting to imagine, you walking around and say, oh yeah, this is it. Is that pretty much how it happened?
To a degree. I don't know what it is about the way I write, but I have to see and understand the sights of what I'm, bringing my characters into. And so a lot of it was quite literally walking around. I always have a little notebook on me. I'm sitting on it right now. And just writing what I saw. And sometimes it's the little details, or often, I think most of it is the little details. We all know what the Duomo in Florence looks like. That's the easy target. What's more interesting to me is what's down in the dirt. The fact that, are people just tossing the rubbish into the dirt, or what sort of dresses, what sort of fabrics are on people's, on their shoulders. It's those details that I feel like let me feel like I can inhabit these characters' lives, however briefly.
Did you connect with contemporary Florentine people, because they tend to be warm and very supportive
Yes.
for anything artistic? So I would imagine that.
No, I'm very, very lucky to have met a number of really lovely, informative, welcoming Florentines that guided me through this. Sometimes gave me like false anecdotes about the history. I have to say,
That's that for sure.
yeah. Some people claim that Botticelli and Leonardo opened up a restaurant together.
Okay.
There is no surviving record of that I could find.
Do they now own that restaurant?
No. I mean, I'm gonna say this because I'm in Ptown. Like, the cruising scene in here is maybe lifted from an experience I had in Florence on such a trip in the past. And
You
so,
don't say.
yeah, that's, writing from life. That's what we do. But really, I think what also is so impressive are the archivists, are the historians that are keeping the vestiges of this time period alive. I think one of the most remarkable experiences I had when I was in Florence researching is that I went to the state archives, which are just outside the old city gates, and it's a weirdly modern building. You're probably imagining something like very, Renaissance picturesque, but it's a building I believe that was built in the 70s.
Yeah, that's that.
And
Kind of ugly.
it's interesting. Let's say it provides interesting tension with the rest of the city. Went inside. My Italian is not excellent, but I was able to, get registered, request an item, and it was a ledger of sodomy accusations that survived from the 1470s. And this woman just hands me this 50-pound ledger. It's leather bound. It's huge. I shuffle to my desk in this massive archive room, and it's just, they let me just page through this ledger, and it was hundreds of names of men who were accused of sodomy in the year 1476
That's
alone.
fantastic.
And in that list, in the real history, Leonardo's name is in that ledger, and it still survives 500 years later, which is incredible.
That's a very special moment
Yeah.
for you to be living that
Yeah.
that aspect. There's so much. The archives of Florence, both the Uffizi and the National. There's
Exactly.
so much that you can dig out of it, and I'm sure that you almost got lost.
Oh, absolutely. It took me like 2 hours just to find Leonardo's name because A, my Italian's not great. B, I forgot that I've been studying contemporary Italian and not medieval Italian, and so trying to read these names in handwriting from the 1400s, it was a bear of a time, but I got through there after like 2 hours of just going line by line. Yeah, it's incredible. It's a treasure trove of a city in that regard.
That's an amazing story for you. The story of the research is really fascinating for me, and having a husband who's a writer, like I want to ask you, like, when was the crisis point? When was the dark day? When was the moment?
Andrew definitely my husband has photos of me like walking out of our tiny home office, like with my hair, like, when I pull at my hair, which happens a lot when I'm writing it goes up. And there was a particularly rough day where my hair just was like quite vertical. And I would say the crisis point, there is a moment in the narrative about 2/3 through where things have to leap forward for various reasons that I will leave ambiguous at this time. And I had a really challenging time of figuring out how to make that leap. And it wasn't until I wrote through it and then decided I just needed to delete everything I wrote that I think I finally felt comfortable with that leap. It's the hard part of writing to the historical record, is that there were times where I wished that characters would be aligned, that timelines would be perfect, but instead someone's here in 1476 and I really need them over in Rome or this or that. I gave myself my own headaches, unfortunately, but it worked out in the end.
It really did. It really did. There's something about the creative process that has that wave of, or at least I experience it like that. You fall in love with an idea, and you get really excited, and it's amazing, and it's really great, and it's really great, and then you get a little tired, and then you just go deep, and then there's a moment that you go like, oh, this is a stupid idea, what am I doing?
Yes, and I feel like I had that on a very heightened scale, because essentially I was working in film marketing in Los Angeles, and there was a version of this book that I wrote as a TV pilot when I was in my third year of university. So this goes way back for me, but I couldn't quite quit the idea. It just kept lurking back into my head, and I think following the 2016 election, certain ideas around Lorenzo de Medici and how power and art are intertwined, but sometimes in tension with one another, in conflict with one another, that came to mind. But eventually I just couldn't not answer the call to write the book,
It had
and
to be done.
I was like, coming home from work and getting some pages done. I was even like booking myself meetings while I was at the office and hiding in a conference room and writing for an hour. And eventually I just got to the point where I was like, I think I need to just sit down and write this book and quit my job. And thankfully, Andrew did not, balk when I said that. So
Thank you for doing it.
Yes.
Because you gave us this, and it's really something. So
no, thank you.
thank you for doing it. I have a million things that I would like to. The Ptown Ferry. I have a million things that I would like to ask you. It's interesting that you started having this idea earlier on, and was already focused on Da Vinci even then.
No, so that's the interesting part. It was set during the same time period, involving some of the same characters, but the component of Leonardo was missing, and I think that's why the script never quite resolved for me. There was something missing, and I think it was this artistic lens on the time period, and then also this queer lens, because I think when I properly sat down to do the research for this novel, the thing that became so apparent is that Florence was extremely queer during this time period, but that's not really one of the foremost parts of the discourse around the time period. And so I think being able to write into the story through Leonardo, and through understanding how artists from Michelangelo to Botticelli to Leonardo are all queer and different manifestations of the term, and how that we can see that in their art today. Like if you look at Michelangelo's David, I'm sorry, I don't see that. I can't see that anyway, but as someone who really appreciated the physical beauty of men.
Yeah, the male gaze.
Yes, the male gaze is drawn on that ass.
It's definitely visible, and it was part of the radical aspect and part of what made the Renaissance click.
Exactly.
In that sense. So, and Renaissance is something that attracted you because of your studies, because of your personal,
I
why?
have to give credit to my 7th grade middle school French teacher, who her name was Madame de Pizzi. Her name is Madame de Pizzi, and she used to, I think when we used to get rowdy as 7th graders, she used to tell us stories about how she was descended from the Pazzi family, from the Renaissance of Florence. And I don't know what it was but about her stories, but they just captured an interest in this time where people are trying to assassinate each other, but there's also some of the world's greatest art emerging, on top of history that is still very present with us today. I think really stark parallels. You have rising authoritarianism, you have incredible wealth inequality, you have this very complicated relationship between artists being dependent on payment to survive, and the compromises that are involved in mixing art and commerce. And so the fascination is long-standing, but I guess the parallels were what drew me back in.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. And it's indeed it's like the beginning of modernity as we know
Exactly.
it, and from there to credit cards.
Exactly. I mean, really not that far from where they were. That's the interesting part.
Should we open the question to the
Sure,
room?
yeah.
Right.
Yes, please.
So if
And
anyone has
would you
questions-
just because I won't be able to get through, just summarize briefly the question.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The question.
Thank you.
Brave soul to go first. Yes, please.
Was there a difference in terms of sort of the level you were in society as to what you could get away with? at that time?
Yes, I think from what we understand, speaking from like the historical perspective, is that certainly there were mechanisms that benefited folks from more privileged backgrounds. For instance, one of the central questions that fascinated me with Leonardo's accusation especially is that he's from a fairly, his father is a notary, which is a rather prominent role within Florentine society at the time. He's also accused along with another member of the Medici family, and we don't know if they were arrested or not. That's something that I explore in the book, but that's not something that we know to this point today. But it is highly speculated that one Medici makes a proverbial phone call to the officers of the watch, is what they were called. And that likely resulted in some leniency. But generally speaking, Florence was seen as more progressive. There was still this essentially nighttime police force that were rounding up, accusations, anonymous accusations. But I would imagine that the folks from, wealthy families, gilded families, leadership, often saw those charges just mysteriously dropped, whereas like there is a sex worker in here, we have to imagine what happened to the sex worker that is often, accused alongside these names. Very good question.
Can you talk a little bit more about the line there and how you navigate research, staying true to these figures in that time and the imagination? How did you keep that so it didn't get too speculative, but also fill in those gaps?
Absolutely. So the question was about the line between balancing the historical record and imagination when writing historical fiction. I would say the challenge for me was actually not the speculative end of things, it was including too much of the history. I think there's probably a first draft of this book that just has so much unnecessary historical context, and I think one of the hard things is that you need to be fluent in the history. You need to know what was the common garment that people were wearing so you can describe it, but little details, even if they're fascinating, may not be relevant to the story that you're telling. And I think where I felt like I had permission was, if I had fluency in how the historical time period was composed, it's my job as a novelist to just imagine the what's in between. We all know which paintings that survive Leonardo has made that are standing in museums today, but we don't fully know the inspiration. And I think that's what really drew me into the story, was understanding from where does this inspiration stem. How is it paid for? We don't know who commissioned some of Leonardo's key early works. So a lot of times it was leaning into the speculation where the historical record just does have, questions remaining.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, wonderful.
I really enjoy books that are based on place,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm really looking forward to reading that.
So wonderful.
Every once in a while, and this sort of plays into the same historical fact versus what you have to make up. Every once in a while I'll read a book and it's got a strong sense of place, but they're kind of micromanaging my progress through that space, and I hate that. Because it actually takes me away from the place. I don't know what it is. Can you talk a little bit about how you have place as a character in your art?
Yes, I certainly, view Florence as, there are three narrators to the story, but Florence really is the unofficial fourth narrator. It is the story of the city reaching its peak. I think it is a difficult balance of not directing you through the city, and I think that's where, I name certain streets, but I try to be somewhat vague about leaning away from the landmarks that we are oftentimes familiar with as tourists to Florence. I think it is about trying to just bring you inside as much as possible too, what was going on in the artist workshop. Like, it is so tempting to explore what might be going on down the street, but that's not and that's not necessary to what I'm trying to explore about Leonardo staying up late trying to paint this tiny fish, which is I think chapter 5. And I think it is striking a balance of making sure we understand where we are and where we're navigating the city, but not being prescriptive. Like, I don't want to be a GPS for you, probably because I would get it incorrect as well. There was another hand over here. Yeah.
How do you balance, like, in the reading, there was that immediate connection, right?
Mhm.
Of, like, that queer experience, that, like, wanting to see,
Mm-hmm.
that felt very much like a contemporary queer experience, and recognizing, like, this is happening centuries ago.
Yeah.
And so balancing that tone and voice and experience that we share with what put him.
So the question was a very excellent question. Was balancing contemporary queer sensibility with the historical context of the book. I would say it was a balancing act. There is the temptation to just, as bold as it is to claim this, to like write myself into Leonardo's life here, and that's not what I was doing, but I did think there were moments of opportunity. So the cruising section, which I read, is, certainly there's some of my personal biography that's coming through there. But there is, maybe it's about the emotions of the scene, of saying like, oh, I'm attracted to something, but I don't know if I should be doing this. What happens if I do it? What happens if I cross this threshold? Where I had to balance that with the historical context is, I felt like I had permission there because I did, read a wonderful historical record of homosexuality in Florence at the time by an academic named Michael Rocky called Forbidden Friendships. And he really does describe these contemporary sources that are describing men having sex behind the public baths, men having sex in the churches, men having sex practically everywhere. And so I felt like, okay, there is an opportunity to perhaps authentically, factually, in a factually true manner, describe the scene. And it's about marrying that historical accuracy perhaps with an emotional truth. Something that was tricky in here is that the word gay is never used because the word gay wasn't invented until the 1800s. Even the idea of like a homosexual identity is a complicated thing to force into the past. And so but at the same time, I could not really conceptualize Leonardo as anything other than a queer artist. And so it was about leaning away from labels and just thinking about how attraction, desire, lust, romance are influencing both his identity as an artist, but also just his day-to-day life. And I guess I didn't say this yet, but the title Florenzer gets into this because Florenzer, during the Renaissance, was the Habsburg term for a sodomite. And so it was a bit of a, for lack of a better way to put it, was like a bit of a slur. And it was derogatory in the sense that, because Florence had this rather profound reputation for being a bit of a magnet for men who are having sex with men, there's this connotation attached to the term Florenzer. And the publisher let me title it, it was not the original
Which
title.
is awesome.
I would also thank Pope Francis for that news cycle where he used that Italian term that I will not repeat on this microphone to refer to some of the members of the church, and gave me the idea, so thank you, Pope Francis. Any other questions? These have been really wonderful, thank you. Yes?
You talked about ambition, you have 3 main characters.
Yes.
Their ambitions are all different. Can you talk to that, how you decide?
Absolutely. Really good question about the 3 points of view and ambition being a component of all of that. And I think that is, outside of all being men from Florence, they're all men with concrete ambitions. And so, Lorenzo de Medici is inheriting his father's bank, but he's also striving to legitimize his power than being more than a de facto ruler of Florence. Leonardo, of course, has ambitions to not just paint, but invent, design, have these wild imaginings. And then Francesco Salviati, the priest, has ambitions to, rise to a certain stature within the church. The way I saw it is that I think legacy is such a huge component of the Renaissance. So much of it is about, and so much about the art that survives was about legitimizing your family's actions, your family's accumulation of wealth through commissioning a fresco to be painted in your family chapel inside one of the cathedrals, or donating some funds to see the edifice of Santa Maria Novella built. And so I think there was a real obsession, which I think, again, a parallel with our time today, of understanding what survives after we go. And I think the ambition that the three men are showcasing is all a symptom of that need to establish a legacy. And you've read the book, I know, so maybe that's that lust for legacy is not the strongest or wisest decision. It might be something that the book explores.
It's beautiful because you bring the three facets of ambition. Like the three characters have three different versions of this Renaissance man, ambition and desire to affirm themselves, and three different motivations. But there's also the universal aspect of it, which connects also with the idea of you putting some of yourself and your contemporary experience. That it's not a contemporary sensibility, but it's a universal one, right?
I think that's a very
so there's the moment of connection between reading these stories and recognizing, like, we really haven't changed at all.
Yeah.
People will be people.
Yes.
Ambition will be ambition, and we'll have facets, but some dark ones too.
Yes, certainly. Any other questions?
There is a question here about where else you'll be.
Where else will I be? This is actually my last event of this phase of the book tour. So I am on a flight back to London on Saturday. But I would love to come back sooner rather than later. So, hopefully someplace soon, let's say.
Great. Maybe we'll get you at our Boston store for an event, and then you can go to Politics and Prose in DC.
There we go. Let's make it happen.
And Mitch Kaplan's Books and Books in Coral Gables. That's a great location.
Love all of these. Let's make it happen.
I think there's a question about that.
Okay.
Are you selling merch?
Oh, yes, thank you. This is shameless plug. Andrew has made quite incredible but also stylish merch. I have some models over there lifting up their options. So if you are so interested in having a cap to wear to Boy Beach, or a quite beach-friendly tote to carry your copy of Florenzer, find Andrew, wave Andrew. He's in the white t-shirt on the stairs. He'll get you situated.
What does the tote say? I couldn't quite see it.
Yeah. The tote says wine, sweat, and seed.
Oh, nice.
Which is a line from the book. I had to tell my mother it meant something else.
I was going to ask you
Yes, please.
if any wine did help you with some inspiration.
I mean,
mostly. I mean, it's so connected with Italian history and modern day and ancient world.
it was more that the wine didn't help me before the writing, it helped me after, let's say. You know, it'd be tempting to, I'm a morning writer, so I think I'd be in trouble if I was cracking open a bottle of, of Italian red before sitting down to write in the morning. But certainly, you carry a lot in your head when you're writing, and sometimes it's hard to shake off at the end of the day, especially when you're writing from at home. There were days where I didn't really interact with anyone else except my husband and my characters. And sometimes a glass of red wine is a great way to solve that.
In vino veritas.
There we go, yes. Oh, brilliant.
Will you continue to write historical fiction, or will you go in some other direction?
Ooh, excellent question. So, will I continue to write historical? Yes, but will I go in other directions? Also yes. So, I do have a historical novel in the works, but I also might have put that on the back burner to work on a contemporary novel set in LA, 2024. It's a bit of a relationship drama, so I'm thinking that will probably make it out into the world first, because I have another historical novel entirely unrelated to this, but it requires a hell of a lot more research. So I'm eager to be drafting again, but time will tell.
Can you tell us where is the research going to be?
I will say, because it's not a fixed point, it's on a ship.
Okay.
So I need to spend more time at sea and hopefully not get as seasick as I was last time I did it. Wonderful.
Well, Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great pick. I'd also just like to, if I can self-indulgently just thank all of you for being here. These events are always a little nerve-wracking of not, especially in places with great people, but that I, don't know many locals in. So thank you so much for showing up. It really means the world, especially, given that this is my first book. I also want to thank the friends that came along on this outing tonight and letting me hijack our Ptown vacation to promote my book. And I want to thank you, Greg, and you, Jeff. And Greg has an exciting show tomorrow, so I'm going to let him.
Queer.
Yes, you want to talk more about
It's
it?
the queerest show in town. Tomorrow I'm showing Wealthiest, which is a British painter that paints in a Renaissance style. And so it's oil on raw linen. But the scenes he paints, although they're very rich in art history, they are incredibly contemporary and they are gay fetish. So there's a lot of really, really edgy hookup scenes that are going to be at the gallery tomorrow night. So we keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, it's gallery night tomorrow night. So if you're here on the East End, you can visit the galleries. And what's the street number? I mean, the building number?
6 commercial.
Right.
It's that 7 to 9. It's gallery stroll. It's been 19 years that Ptown offers gallery stroll. So we keep that tradition going.
Wonderful. And it's going to be great weather, so that'll be perfect. And then you can take a break, watch the fireworks back here, and then go back out. Well, thank you.
And that's wine. That's wine.
At your place? Oh, there you go. And a lot of places will have it. So if you want books, if you don't already have it, we've got an employee inside. You can get the book signed, and then just come back out here to get them signed. And then if you want to buy merch, that'll be handled by my assistant, Vanna White, directly over there. And thank you very much. Thank you for coming. We hope we'll see you Saturday. Thanks.